Okay, welcome to another prepared flight simulator video. And in this video we're going to continue our mountain hopping journey through the Colorado mountains. But as I stated in the other video, the last video, I was going to switch to the Cessna Caravan at least for one hop. And the reason I want to do that is to show this issue that I'm having with the G1000 cockpit, where I can't, basically when I'm flying VOR to VOR, I can't tell where I'm at in relation to the VOR when I'm using the G1000. But in the Cessna Caravan, which has older and less sophisticated instrumentation, I find it actually easier to do VOR flights. So I've done a bit of pre-video setup here just to speed things up, and you can see that I've already dialed in the frequency for the next VOR, or for the VOR that we're going to be flying to. Got that dialed in here. It's 108.20, and we can see here in the distance measuring equipment that we are 42, or rather 43.2 nautical miles from that VOR. And this leg of the journey we're going to be flying toward that VOR at a course of 0, 9, or 1, and then we're going to fly toward that VOR for 42.9 nautical miles. Then we're going to fly away from that VOR for 33.6 nautical miles. So we kind of need to hurry up here if I want to keep this video down to 30 minutes. So let me just do a course adjustment on the knob really quick, and then we'll get in the sky. So let me actually adjust it on my other one up here because I can see it easier. So we want to fly toward the VOR at 0, 9, or 1. So I'm going to set my heading to 0, 9, or 1, and I'm going to set my course to 0, 9, or 1. Okay, there we are. You can see this dial down here is now set. And let me just do a little bit of thinking here, and then we'll get in the sky. Okay, I think everything's all set here. So go ahead and center the view for takeoff, and then once I get in the air, I'll put the camera back down so we can see the instruments. I set the weather conditions to rainy, as you can see. We put the flaps down 1 notch. And let me check here. What is it? 4? Yeah, 4. I just want to check to make sure that the flaps are down 1 notch, and they are. Okay, so let's take off. And once again, I have the instrument panel up on my second monitor, but that doesn't show up in the video playback, so you won't be able to see that. But as you see me looking up, that's what I'm looking at the other monitor. Just doing a little bit of corrective yaw here to make sure that we go down the middle of the runway. Gonna pitch back. And we're in the sky. There's no landing gear to raise on this one. Just gonna climb out at the runway heading. Go ahead and tilt the camera down because we can't see much outside anyway. Make sure the vertical speed's positive. Fly the runway heading here until we get up to a couple hundred feet at least. Panning the camera back and forth so we can see what the ground looks like relative to us. Let's let the nose settle down a little bit. We're climbing a little too aggressively here for this aircraft. Go ahead and raise the flaps now before I forget about it. And I checked the prepared form just before recording, and there still is no word on when the new version is going to be released. They did do an update today, in fact, Friday, January 24th. But it just updated to say that they've resolved a few more of the problems, but there's still no date given for when the 2.05 or 2.1 release is going to come out. It's looking like it's going to be a 2.1 release, not a 2.05 as they were thinking about there for a while. It's going to go ahead and start banking now to the right so we can get on course with our navigation. You can see the dial down in the center. This is the one I'm looking at to know where. You can see the mouse moving around that dial. That's the one that I'm going to be using to know if I'm on course or not. And then simply the digital display over here that tells me how close I am to the VOR. Now I'm sure there's a way to set this up in the G1000, but I just haven't figured it out. A couple people left me comments in the last video giving me some ideas, things to try, but I tried their suggestions and it didn't work. So somewhere in the G1000 there's a way to set your distance measuring equipment, but I can't find it. So I wanted to use the caravan for this leg of the flight so we could see, what I was talking about in the last video. You can see we're almost on course. We're coming up to the point now where we're going to be flying at 0, 9, or 1, but we want to go past that maybe just a little bit so that our needle will swing over toward the middle. Just putting in a little more right bank. And I don't know if you should necessarily fly full throttle on this one. I do. Actually, you know what I forgot to do while I was on the ground? I forgot to set my elevator trim again. So that means as soon as I touch the trim wheel, it's going to bobble really bad. So let me just go ahead and take care of that now. You're going to see, what you're going to see is I adjust the trim wheel. The first time you load the simulator, it basically needs to initialize the trim, and you should do that while you're on the ground. But since I didn't do it on the ground, it's now going to, actually oddly too, apparently the trim wheel wasn't even recognized as a USB device. You just heard that sound, Windows just found it. Anyway, apparently in this vessel it was initialized okay. I see these mountains out in front of me, so I'm going to continue climbing. Make sure we get over that. Bank a little bit more to the right, because we're not quite on course yet. And again, I'm using this instrument here to determine whether or not I'm on course. Now the Cessna Caravan moves about, quite a bit slower than the Mooney Bravo, or rather the Mooney Acclaim. So this leg and the next leg of the flight will take a little bit longer than it would if we were in the Mooney Acclaim, because we're only moving at 140 knots as opposed to 220, I think, is the Mooney Acclaim. And we don't quite have as good of visibility out the front window, at least with this virtual cockpit view. Even if I pan the camera up, you can see that we're still, visibility isn't that good, so we kind of rely on looking out the window side to side. I'll tell you though, if I could build a sim pit, money no object type of thing, and assuming that I had the skill set to do such a thing, which I don't, I'd have to hire out for everything because I have no talent whatsoever when it comes to tools and building. But if I could build a sim pit, at least one that I would really want would be the for the Cessna Caravan. I just really like this vessel. I always have. I've flown it in Microsoft Flight Simulator 10, Microsoft Flight Simulator, whatever the version was before that one, the Century of Flight one, and I think 2002 also. I flew this one a lot. I never invested money into purchasing planes beyond what came with just the default simulator, so it's very possible that if I bought a bunch of other planes, I would find one that I like better. But at least for the planes that come with the simulator, that came with Microsoft Flight Simulator, I kind of always liked this one about the best. I also like the Cessna Skyhawk, but since it was quite a bit slower than the Caravan, I tended to gravitate more toward the Caravan just because you could fly a little bit farther, a little bit faster, without getting into like Learjets and stuff. Those are fun too, but Learjets, obviously they're more optimized for flight at altitude, 40,000 feet or something like that. Whereas the smaller planes, you know, you kind of get down on the ground and fly across the ground, and I like that. I just like to fly where I can kind of pan the camera around and see outside and have nice visuals. If you just fly airliners all the time or Learjet, then, you know, when you look outside, it's just not, there's really nothing to look at. But I guess, you know, if your goal is to just learn IFR and to practice, you know, communication with ATC and things like that, then flying the Learjet and flying the Boeings and stuff like that would be more realistic, because you would have, you know, you don't need to look at the ground anyway. But purely from a gaming, quote-unquote, point of view, I just like to be able to look outside and see, you know, like, this is a beautiful view. You know, look out there and you have trees, mountains, clouds. This looks nice. Now, I don't really know what's in front of me, so I'm just going to kind of continue climbing here. I actually do have maps of, actually, never mind, my maps are for Florida, not for Colorado. I was going to say I could look up elevation and stuff in my maps, but I only have extensive maps for Florida. I'm really, really wanting to get, like, Orbix Global or maybe Rex 4 or something like that, just because I'm really curious how much better the visuals will look. But Orbix Global is quite an investment. I mean, it's like $100 just for, you know, just for the graphics. And I'm sure it's probably worth it, because the time and effort that went into developing it has to be pretty substantial. But, you know, that's a lot of money for somebody like me. So I'm just gonna, whoa, get a bit of a wind gust there. Just banking a bit to the right, just trying to get back on course. You can see from our distance measuring equipment, we are 21.6 nautical miles from the VOR. Bring my nose back down. And just try to keep the nose from dropping too much here. You can see our vertical speed's gone into the negative, so we're descending. Definitely don't want that. Now, I don't know if it's cheating or not, but what I can do is I can actually switch cockpit views to see more of what's in front of me. Take out some of this trim so it's not, so the nose isn't wanting to climb so much. Now we're really well on course with our navigation equipment. You can see here, this instrument indicates that the yellow line is exactly in the center. That's what we want. So now if we fly with the yellow arrow pointing straight up, then we should be flying straight to that VOR. And that's what we want. So let's do that. And then once we reach the VOR, we're going to change course. And we're going to fly away from the VOR. And our new course heading, once we get to the VOR, will be B067. We basically have straight and level flight. Vertical speed is just a little bit in the negative, so I'm going to tap the trim wheel just a touch, just to make sure that we're flying level. And it looks like we're at 9,000 feet. Let me actually set the barometer. I never did that while I was on the ground. That's actually kind of a cheat to just reach down and press B. You should actually dial into the ATIS and find out what your barometric pressure is. But yeah, if I kind of tilt the camera to the left and then over to the right, I don't really get a good sense of like what's right in front of me. But I think, you know, from over this way, you can tell clearly that there's not like a big steep incline. So just with that information, we should be able to know that we're not flying straight into a mountain. But if you really wanted to be sure, I would think you'd probably have to turn off the virtual cockpit for a second. Go to cockpit view like that. Now you can see directly in front of you. But again, I don't know, I kind of think something like that's a little bit kind of cheating a little bit. If I had track IR, I could probably actually physically sit up in my chair and try to look over the canopy or over the hood, and that would be a little bit more realistic. But I do not have a track IR. I would like to get one, but I kind of tend to think that I wouldn't use it very much. And they're kind of expensive, a couple $100s, I think. And I'm really thinking the Oculus Rift will be way cooler. One problem with Oculus Rift, though, will be like making videos like this one. When you have, I mean, if you've ever seen an Oculus Rift video online, you always have those two side-by-side views that are kind of elliptical in shape, and it's not a good way to make videos. Okay, so we're 12.1 nautical miles from the VOR, and we're flying on course. Vertical speed is 0, so we have basically level flight. And the airport that we're flying to is 2 Victor 1. And it has an elevation of 7,700 feet. So we are not quite 2,000 feet above the elevation of that airport. But not real sure what we have between here and there as far as mountains and such go. So we have to keep an eye out to make sure that we're not flying straight into the side of a mountain. Looks like I can do maybe just a little bit of a course adjustment, very minor. Bank the plane to the right. Looking down here, I can see that my needle has drifted just ever so slightly off center. And we're flying through a cloud. You know, the other thing I like about this plane is that it just feels like it's really stable in the sky. Like you can just take your hands off and it just kind of wants to fly straight and level. And I mean, the Mooney Acclaim is really good too, but I just feel like this plane is just like especially rock solid. You can see some kind of airport down there passing us on the left side. Now we're only about 7 nautical miles from the VOR, so we want to get on course for one thing. The closer you get to the VOR, the tighter the radial is, you know, which makes perfect sense if you're, you know, anytime you're walking towards something, the closer you get to it, the bigger of a difference it is if you make slight deviations in your path. So we need to bank to the left here to get back on course. We're only 5.5 nautical miles now from the VOR, so we're going to be flying straight over top of it pretty soon. Straighten the craft back out. And knowing that we're this close to the VOR, we don't need to fight the measurement here. You know, we just need to basically try to stay more or less on track. But there's no point in trying to keep it perfect. Once that number starts increasing, then we know that we've gone all the way to the VOR and are now flying away from it. At that point, we can change our course. See, again, it's more sensitive the closer you get to the VOR, and when you get really close to it, like we are now, basically you're basically over top of it, because it says we're 2.7 nautical miles away, but part of that is just our altitude. So I'm not gonna chase that needle any farther. There's no point. I'm just gonna wait for that number to start increasing, and then we know we have passed it. And then again, we want to fly to 067, so I'm going to do a course adjustment in just a moment. No hurry. So we're passing the VOR, and the VOR tower is off to our right. And we're 1 nautical mile away from it. You can see here. Okay, we're basically right there. That's 0.7, and it's probably going to start increasing shortly. So let's go ahead and change our course to 067. And then we will change our heading as well, but let's get on course first. So we've got our course changed. Let's go ahead and bank to the left. Bring that view up just a little bit. Put in a little bit of back pressure on the stick as we're doing this turn here, especially because we're experiencing some wind gust. But the back pressure on the stick just ensures that we don't lose altitude in our turn. And if we fly straight away from the VOR at 067, then we should encounter the airport when we are 33.6 nautical miles from the VOR. So that's the plan. Okay, we're mostly turned to the correct heading now. And with regards to the needle, again, since we're so close to the VOR, this is still quite sensitive. The farther away we get, the less sensitive it'll be, so there's no point in chasing the needle back and forth as we're flying away from the VOR. We just want to get it, you know, close to the center and then fly that heading. Okay, I've got the course adjustment set. Let me set the heading knob also. Let's see. Here we go. And I don't really even have to set the heading knob because I'm not using the autopilot. But I like having everything where it needs to be. Okay, course 067 and heading 067. There we go. And we're 5.4 nautical miles away from that VOR now. So probably when we get to about 25 nautical miles from the VOR, we'll start thinking about our landing. And I'm guessing that I have a little bit of a hard time determining distance in simulators, so I'm thinking that must be closer than 33 nautical miles, so we're probably going to have to cross over those mountains. I'm guessing. Yeah, especially if I kind of look here to the left, you can see how close that stuff really is, so we'll be flying over top of that. So we don't really want to necessarily descend. So a little bit of back pressure on the elevator trim. Just enough to keep us climbing just a little bit. And we'll look out here to the right. Nice view. Yeah, we don't want to descend really because I can kind of sense that this terrain here is probably just, you know, a few hundred feet below us. And our needle is almost lined up here, down here, so we want to definitely get on course. Let's check everything out. We're descending a little bit. Let's not descend. And we're pretty much perfectly on course, so we're going to go ahead and finish our banking over to the left to get our heading situated. 12 nautical miles from the VOR, so we're not very far away from our destination now. And I think I'll have, better luck landing the Caravan. I've never really had any problems with it. Probably don't have my timing and everything correct. I probably descend too quickly or not quickly enough and probably land too fast or whatever, but I don't have problems crashing, nose diving into the runway like I do with the Mooney Acclaim. Again, gonna bank to the left here. We're needle slipping slightly. 14 nautical miles from the VOR. Climbing just a little bit. We don't really want to climb, so I'm just going to touch the trim wheel ever so slightly to take out that little bit of ascent, because we don't need to climb anymore, I don't think. Coming into a cloud here, so hopefully we'll get out of that quickly. Like to be able to see where I'm going, but I also like the relative challenge of having just a little bit of weather. Okay, back to level flight. So probably somewhere down there is going to be our airport. And that being the case, gonna throttle back just a little bit and we'll start descending at just 500 feet per minute. Because we're at 17.7 nautical miles now from the VOR, and we've only got to go to 33.6. So now we're descending, and that is intentional. Throttling back just a little bit more. One thing I've noticed about the Caravan, its throttle is not instant. Like when you throttle back, there's some kind of delay. I've gotten used to it, and it's no big deal, but I've always noticed that about the Caravan, is that there's some kind of delay between when you input your change in the throttle and when you actually feel and hear the results. So we've got a descent rate now of about 500 feet per minute. I'd say that's pretty good. We're on course. We're 21.1 nautical miles from the VOR. One thing I don't know, actually I do, the runway heading is 1 and 19, and we have winds out of 126. So we're going to want to land on runway 19. Big wind gust there. Let's pitch the vessel up, correct for the wind gust. 23.5 nautical miles from the VOR, so we only have 10 nautical miles to go. So we should see 2v1 here before too long. And we probably want to bank, since we're going to land on 19, we probably want to bank to the left early. So let's fly at a heading of 30. Actually, let me look at that again. Wind. Winds are out of 237. I read that wrong. So we're going to land runway 1. So let's get back on course. Either way, it's going to be a crosswind, so it almost doesn't matter. "27 nautical miles from the VOR, so we only have 7 nautical miles to go. Just looking at the winds again, trying to make sure that I'm reading that right. So they're out of 237. Seems to me like that's a crosswind no matter which way we go. Okay, let's not descend anymore. Bringing up the throttle a little bit for now. 30 nautical miles out, so we should have the airport right in front of us. I think I see it over there to the left. It's like a strip. Okay, let's see if we can do this. Might have to do a flyover of the landing strip first. Yeah, that's it. Boy, that's just a tiny little landing strip. Flaps down. Throttle up. We got the runway in front of us, mostly. Do-over. Wasn't centered enough with the runway and just wasn't comfortable with that at all, so we're going to fly out a bit. Flaps up. So anyway, we were able to find our destination with just VOR without using a GPS. And we can see our runway down there. So we'll fly out a bit and come back and land. Now I don't have any distance measuring equipment to tell me how far I am from the airport, so what I used to do in the past would just be to use a stopwatch, and I would actually time myself and just fly out, you know, for some period. But here I'm just going to kind of do it visually. Going to go down past that peak, like right here. Let me point to it with the mouse. Kind of that valley right there. I'm going to go past that and turn around and come back. Make sure the flaps are all the way up, and they are. Let's climb a little bit more. That peak is coming up pretty quickly, and it's not very close to the ground. Or I mean, we are closer to the ground than we need to be if we're going to climb over that peak. Just try to maintain as level flight as possible, but just enough vertical speed to get over that. Okay, let's climb a little bit more just to make sure we clear it. It's pretty close. Okay, we're over the peak. And before we get to the next peak, we'll turn around and go back and land on 19. I think that might be the better airport. That might be the better runway anyway. I think it's less crosswind than 1. All right, let's bank. Pan the camera down just a little bit more so we can see. Got a good wind gust there. And the wind's just completely turned around. Now they're... Wow, they're all over the place. Look at that. Sloppy turn. Diving. Okay, well, I didn't realize I had overturned. And this side, the advantage we have runway lights if we come in from this side. Okay, let's get lined up. Okay, I see 2 white lights and 2 reds, so let's bring the throttle back a little bit. Get a glide slope curve here. We're a bit too high now, of course. One level of flaps. And the flaps bring up the nose, so I'm kind of putting in some down elevator to compensate for that. Okay, we've got 2 white and 2 red. That's what we want. Now we just need to keep a consistent descent rate of 500 feet per second. Two white, 2 red, pretty well centered. And we're down. Not the best landing, of course, but we made it down and we didn't bounce and we didn't nosedive into the runway. Let's go ahead and come to a wheel stop here. So yeah, VOR to VOR using this older navigation method for me at least is simpler, but I'm sure it's just a matter of learning how to set that type of thing up in the G1000, which at this point I don't know how to do. Okay, we're almost at wheel stop. And there we are. So the next leg of the flight is going to be from 2V1 to KSKX. That's Kilo Sierra, I think. Kilo X-ray. If you like this part of the video, please do hit the like button down below, and if you didn't like it, hit the don't like button. Subscribe to the channel if you're not already subscribed and you like flight simulator type of stuff. Primarily orbiter is the main thing I do here on this channel, so if you're into space flight, then you're definitely going to want to subscribe. Look in the description down below for links, and I will see you in the next video.